Welcome, everyone, to the Saver Brain headquarters. My name is Kelsey Boyer, and we are so excited to be in the studio today. Our guest is the Director of Outreach and Business Development at the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab. With a PhD in biomechanics and experience in health and wellness, he is dedicated to advancing research on head protection and injury prevention. Let's welcome Barry Miller. Let's give him an air horn. Here we go. I think we gave him an air horn. Let's just try it again just in case. I have a bunch of questions that, I listened to a lot of videos that you did already. You're so dialed in your craft and what you guys offer. So I felt like we could just have a nice conversation. I think, especially in snow sports, a lot of people are not educated about helmets at all. And the needle's definitely moving of people starting to wear them more and care about what they're putting on their head. But I don't think a lot of athletes know of the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say we made strides, but speaking of helmet, I started snow skiing back in I'm almost 60, and I lived outside South Lake Tahoe, the San Francisco Bay Area, and we skied, and no one wore helmets back in the 80s. And then gradually, now when you rent equipment, a helmet almost always comes in. It's rare that I go anywhere with my buddy and we don't see 95% of the people with helmets on. So I don't know your observations, but I think it's rare when someone doesn't have a helmet now, which is great.
It's interesting. So in Salt Lake City, it's basically the hub of the ski and snowboard industry.
Sure.
And a lot of the core of snowboarding does not wear helmets, like the people filming street parts or backcountry parts. A lot of the professionals aren't wearing them unless they're competing and they're required to wear them. Yeah, it's interesting. But like you said, outside of the core, you wouldn't be caught without wearing one at Palisades or at Snowbird where there's a bunch of rocks. Like people there are definitely buckling up and putting on a helmet. I know. It's weird. And like the core of the industry is just like, we're too cool for helmets.
Well, the rest of your life's a long time, as you well know. Yep.
Yes. So that's why bringing you guys on here, I was like, this is going to be good for people to hear. So I guess if we just want to kick it off with your job is very unique and the helmet testing lab is obviously very unique. But before we dive into what you do on a daily basis there, I'm just curious, what brought you to working at the helmet lab?
Well, actually, my son played basketball with one of the lab founders, and I didn't even know what he did. I knew he worked at Virginia Tech, and I knew he was a big-time researcher, but I didn't really know anything about the helmet lab, even myself. So about 7 years ago is when I discovered, and he said, yeah, I could really use another sport biomechanics guy and a guy with an MBA to help us. We're super busy and we're growing, and it's been a great fit. I mean, this is an excellent lab. The researchers, Dr. Stefan Duma and Steve Rosen, are outstanding researchers. Well respected in this field of injury biomechanics is what we do. Certainly best known for our helmet ratings and our concussion research, but we're a comprehensive injury biomechanics lab. So we do all kinds of stuff. We do all the toy testing for the Hasbro toy company. So better known for Nerf darts, Nerf toys. So yep. Boink boink, we're the ones that test all the Nerf toys, especially the darts, against eye injuries in particular. And so we use surrogate, pig's eyes and things like that to represent the human eye to see how safe some of these toys are.
Wow.
So we do all that. We do all the impact testing for the commercial drones that fly around that insurance companies use.
Yeah.
So we're an FAA approved impact test facility for those. We do the small ones too, like the ones they use for light shows and all that. So we do all kinds of interesting stuff.
Oh, wow. So you do a little bit of everything, it seems.
Yes.
And I guess, go ahead.
When it comes to injuring the human body, yeah, we've got experience in pretty much all areas, but obviously we have expertise in some.
For sure. Yeah, and I guess you just touched on a little bit of it, but I guess if we're talking about helmets, what magic happens at the helmet testing lab? Take us through what a day in the life would look like.
So let's start with the basics of helmets. So when you buy a helmet for anything, whether it's a snow sport helmet, bike helmet, football helmet, they have to be certified by some organization. Every sport's a little bit different. Snow sports happen to be required to be certified by the American Society for Testing Materials, better known as ASTM. There's a couple other international ones, but ASTM is one in the United States. Bike helmets have to be certified by the Consumer Product Safety Committee. Football helmets have to be certified by the National Operating Committee for the Standards of Athletic Equipment, better known as NOCSE. And so every sport kind of has some sort of entity that oversees the certification. The certifications, however, are pass-fail, and the point or threshold to pass is the level of catastrophic head injury, skull fracture, and death. So, which is really important. It's critical, right? So it basically says that, if this helmet passes that certification, since we're talking snow sport helmets, they pass the ASTM standard, and it generally means that if I get into a snow sport accident, I should not get a skull fracture or die wearing that helmet if I'm performing activities associated with that sport. We come along and we supplement those certifications with real-world sport-specific helmet ratings. So basically what we do is our system is called the STAR rating system. It stands for the summation of tests for the analysis of risk, and I can explain that a little bit later. But basically we figure out how do you hit your head when you snowboard, snow ski. And then we come back to the lab and best represent those real-world accidents with test procedures here in the lab. And then we test and evaluate helmets against those criteria. And then we rank order them and post them to our website. Obviously, we got our start with American football, and we put sensors inside football helmets and we started capturing impact data. Now we have over 2 million head impacts data points. And
Wow.
so we have what we call bivariate risk functions. We have a really good idea of what your concussion risk based on those peak linear and or rotational head kinematics. So when you hit your head, you always have a little bit of both, right? You have X, Y, and Z. And then you have rotations about those accidents. So anytime I hit my head, I have some linear movement and then some rotational movement. And we want to make sure we capture those because both of those, have an effect on concussion risk.
For sure.
The certifications or the standards are linear acceleration only. That's the only thing they measure. So they're missing a big piece of the pie. But again, they're really important. I don't want to downplay the certifications, but we supplement those with real-world, sport-specific, environment-specific helmet ratings.
Yeah, so you basically are observing how a snowboarder or skier could fall, and
Right.
that is how you test the helmets. A lot of people don't even know that helmet testing is out there. I compare your star rating as the Michelin stars of helmet testing. Like everybody's trying to get a 5-star.
Yeah, we're kind of like the Consumer Reports of the helmet industry, right?
Mhm.
So there's product differentiation with everything you buy. When you buy a car, that car has to meet some sort of minimal safety standards, right?
Mhm.
But are you driving a Volvo? Volvo used to always be known for their safety versus a Volkswagen Bug.
Yeah.
They both pass the minimal standards, but there's going to be a huge difference if you were to get into a car accident, right? Ford F-150. So, but all of them have these general, standards they have to meet. But some companies surpass those standards with flying colors, and others, oftentimes price dictates this, but they just want to meet the minimum standard, being economical.
Yes.
Unfortunately, helmets don't necessarily follow the price and performance correlation at all. I mean, we have some cheap, I would say inexpensive, not cheap, inexpensive helmets that actually perform really well. And then we have some really expensive helmets that are average.
Yeah.
So a lot of money goes into marketing and that kind of stuff. So and we
Yeah.
don't really know for sure until we test a given helmet model how well it's going to perform. I mean, we have a pretty good idea when we pull it out of the box and we start feeling the foam and the density. We go, all right, I have an idea where this is going to land, and we're usually pretty good, but we don't know for sure until it's tested.
For sure. So you take it out of the box in the lab. If you could break it down for us, how do you test it in the lab? Like, what does that actually look like?
Okay. Well, for any listeners out there, so if you go to our helmet ratings page, vt.edu/helmets, it'll come up or just Google Virginia Tech helmet ratings, and you go to the pull-down menu, you can pick snow sports. Then under snow sports, there's a tab called technical documents. And then that's the methodology. Tells you exactly how we're going to test a helmet, how we're going to interpret the score, and what it all means. But, single impact helmets are a little bit different, and every sport's different. So when people oftentimes email me trying to compare football helmet scores to snow sport helmet star scores, you can't do that because the way we test them is different. The way they're evaluated is different. And so every sport's kind of unique in that respect. So if for, given helmet sample or helmet model, we'll have probably 5 helmet samples because snow sport helmets are single impact, right? So those helmets are designed to crack, crush, crumble, break on impact. That's how they attenuate energy. And I can kind of compare that to like the crush zone in your car. So what you want to have happen if you're to get in a car accident, you want the car to start to absorb energy before it moves you, the driver. So you want it to crush. You want it to deform. Well, same thing with these single impact bike helmets. And we call that decoupling. So you want to decouple from the car, right? So you don't want to do exactly what the car does because then there's no dissipation of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Same thing with the helmet. If the helmet gets hit and it takes your head with it right away, then there was no attenuation or dissipation of energy. What you want the helmet to do is start to absorb energy and maybe even move a little bit independently as it deforms before it takes your head with it. Because these head impacts, they're only 5 to 15 milliseconds.
Yeah.
And it's critical that the helmet starts to absorb energy or moves independently before it takes your head with it. And if we can increase the duration of a given head impact, what happens to the shape of the curve if we draw it out? The curve flattens, right? We dissipate the energy over a greater time, and then we avoid these peaks. And when we can avoid these higher peaks, we reduce concussion risk. So you want the helmet to break apart,
yes,
for the most part. And if they don't, that means the energy was transferred pretty good to your head. You don't want that. So you want cracks, you want crushing, that's a good thing for these single impact helmets. And that's why we need multiple samples because we can't test the same location twice because it's already been deformed. Well, hopefully it's deformed, right? And so that's why we use so many samples. For snow sport helmets, we use 6 test conditions. I believe it's under the technical documents. I don't review that one too much, but 6 test locations.
We'll go with 6.
Yeah, so a couple different anvil angles. When you have a lot of horizontal velocity and you fall vertically, your head's going to hit some sort of angle. So I think for snow sports, we test at 55 degrees and 35 degrees. We don't use friction on that anvil. So basically what the helmet does, for snow sports anyways, we have a helmet and a head form. And there's videos on YouTube for those listeners out there. Just Google and you can see all the different sample testing, the test rigs use. So the helmet and the head form sit on a halo, basically. And the halo holds the helmet as it comes down. It's called a drop tower. And it hits the anvil. And so that halo holds it in the exact location we're trying to test, X, Y, and Z. So it's really tedious to get it in that location. And then basically we're measuring peak, linear, and rotational head movements. So these rapid head movements, and we're recording those. And those get evaluated against that bivariate risk function. I can share a graphic with you that helps so you understand that. But basically that's what we do. And then we test all the helmets against that standardized test protocol. And then based on the results, we rate them accordingly and rank them accordingly. And you'll see that on our webpage.
Yeah. I feel when I was looking at the videos, diving into it, obviously, yes, the videos are so incredible. Everybody listening, definitely go watch those. But when I first initially watched it, I was like, wow, that is so violent looking. But that is what it's like when we are going fast down the hill and we catch an edge. It's an accident, but that is what happens. And I think it's awesome to know that you guys are out there with a helmet testing lab, testing the quality for the safety of these helmets, because people just buy a helmet and they don't really think about the safety of it. Like you were saying, you just walk in, you're like, I have a helmet on, great. But even for me, I was snowboarding with a very old skateboarding helmet with no technology. It just checked the box of a plastic thing on my head with foam. I didn't even know this was a thing.
Yeah, and there is big performance differences and impact attenuation characteristics. So for your listeners, the biggest thing is you want a nice, thick, robust layer of padding, right? More padding is generally better, right? Everyone would agree. And it needs to be a little bit compliant. That most snow sport helmets are made out of expanded polystyrene, better known as EPS, expanded foam. And so, that stuff's really cheap to make. It's pretty resistant to, ultraviolet light, temperature, time. It's pretty good against impacts, but, there's different densities of that expanded foam. And so, the more compliant, the ones that are a little bit softer tend to do a little bit better in our ratings. The certifications are high energy, right? They're trying to protect against a catastrophic head injury, so that the energy they use and then the type of density you need to use to pass that test have to be a little stiffer, right? And so I compare this. So if I told you were going to walk into the wall and bump your head, you'd probably put it pillows. Then I said, what if you were running and you're going to hit your head against the wall? Then what would you pad the wall with? Well, then you say, well, maybe a mattress or something, right? So the density and thickness of the materials make a difference depending on the energy you're trying to protect against, right?
Yeah.
And so snow sport, these single impact helmets in general are designed to protect against the certification standards, which are really high energy. Not that our test doesn't have high energy, but we use a wide variety of energies, right? We want overall performance of the helmet. And so the better helmets are a little bit softer, a little bit thicker, and they protect better against concussion risk because those happen at much lower energy levels, as you well know. So it makes a difference. How you test things make a difference as far as the results, and we want to be sport specific, environment specific. So how do you really hit your head when you're an aerialist on the U.S. ski team? And that's where we collected a lot of our data from per that video I showed you.
I was seeing it's really cool how you worked with the U.S. teams to collect that data because they are elite athletes. They are putting their bodies and brains on the line. Like, slap some respect on that because that is who's going to be doing it to the top. It's also good, something that's in my brain that you said, a lot of people don't understand how helmets work, like the single impact, where it's just like, no, if you hit your head and there's a dent on the helmet or there's a crack or instability in the foam, that means the helmet did its job.
That's right. You want some sort of deformation for sure. Because if it doesn't deformate or deform, then definitely that energy probably gets transferred to your head.
I feel like there's like a misconception about that where people are like, well, my helmet broke, and it's just like, yeah, it worked. Like it did its job.
And I get this question a lot, well, if I drop my helmet, is it going to be okay? Yeah. Dropping your helmet on the concrete as you're standing in line is not going to damage it enough. It takes quite a bit of energy to deform those helmets. So, dropping your helmet, that's not going to do much. There's no weight in it either. They're super light, and so if there's no mass behind it, there's not a lot of energy. So it's fine. Throw it down in disgust on the concrete, that might be a little different, right? They won't accept your ski pass, and so you're pissed off, they won't let you in. Well, that might be a different scenario. But for the most part, they're pretty durable. Like I said, EPS is pretty durable material. There is other materials out there besides expanded foam. Lots of companies are playing around with different forms of these. So you'll see some new models come out in different, like Koroyd you might have seen, or Wave Cell. It's kind of like the honeycomb structure. So there's different types. But performance is still based on that density and thickness of the padding material, whatever it is. 3D lattice structures, honeycomb structures, all kinds of cool stuff out there. So
totally. Yeah, I'm glad you covered that because we get that question a lot. They're like, how do I travel with a helmet? I think people think they're made of glass.
Yeah, no.
I'm so happy you covered that because people are just like, they're not easy to travel with. So I don't travel with it because what if it gets tossed around in my bag and everything like that? That's definitely a big question that we get. Yeah. That's good to know that.
Yeah. The other question is, how long do they last? The manufacturers usually say, 3 to 5 years. But we know from testing, there's a couple other entities that have done this research. Those EPS helmets, they're durable. They'll last a long, long time. We're talking, 10 plus years with not much degradation, less than probably 10%. But obviously, if you're storing it in the hot trunk of your car or things like that, it may change things a little bit, but they're pretty durable for the most part. But the downside to keeping your helmet for that long is there is new technological advances in helmets, and they keep getting better. And if you go to our webpage, you'll see that we add new helmets all the time. Sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't, but they're constantly changing. But in general, the helmet performance is improving. We see it in bike helmets, especially football helmets, snow sport helmets. It's kind of relatively new since we launched that, but they're definitely getting better. And so that's a good idea to say, you know what, maybe it's time to see what new helmets are out there. And you can always see how yours does. We don't have every helmet rated, but we have quite a few. We try to keep pace with the current market, but it's not easy. There's lots of helmets out there.
Yeah. There's a lot. You have a chunk of them on your website though. When I was just kind of educating myself and looking through it, and I guess you've probably seen this a lot, and like you said, you guys are just kind of entering snow sports in a way compared to contact sports. But what has been the evolution of helmets?
Well, if you go back to football, right, that's kind of where they first started wearing them because you hit your head frequently in that sport, right? They started with leather helmets, and then they went to like a plastic shell with some sort of suspension system. And really, the whole goal was to avoid skull fractures and death, right? So, because concussions weren't really understood, and we were still learning a lot. But that was the big push: is to how can we keep our football players on the field? And these go back to the 1940s and 50s. They're getting skull fractures and dying on the football field. So, well, we can't have that. And so, the evolution of the plastic shell, the polycarbonate shell, that and a little bit of some sort of padding actually revolutionized. Yeah, well, now we're not getting skull fractures. Probably still had a lot of concussions, but didn't know how to diagnose those back then. And now, and I should say this. So, as a result of our star ratings, since we're consumer facing, and the certification is real basic. Basic drop, boom, below 100, 275 Gs, which is the point of skull fracture, that helmet passes. Well, the manufacturers really had no design criteria other than that. And then when we came out with our test methodology, so we're telling you exactly how we're going to test a helmet. And so that's the blueprint for the manufacturers to say, oh, if I know how you're going to test it, I can improve the performance based on those test procedures. And so henceforth, everything we've launched, the helmets continue to get better because now there's a blueprint for improving the helmets. And then they want to make 5-star helmets because consumers want to buy 5-star helmets. And so then we keep doing research, adding to the test protocol, improving it, and they keep improving helmets because you guys as consumers keep wanting to buy better, safer helmets. And that's what drives better products. You see this in the automotive industry, right? I mean, back in my day, if you had a seatbelt strap, that was it. Then they had the shoulder strap. Then they had airbags, crush zones. Now you got blinkers, sensors, crush zones. You got airbags everywhere on top, side. And so that's kind of the evolution of safety. But the same thing with helmets, not to that degree as far as the uniqueness of it, but the technology gets better. The density, thickness, type of materials, the geometry, and so everything evolves, right? And so that's where we are with snow sport helmets. They're getting better, and we work with quite a few of the major brands, and they send us prototypes. We test them, evaluate them, and they go back to the drawing board and see what they're going to do. So.
No, that's awesome to hear. Yeah, if only they're gonna start installing airbags into helmets. But
well, it's funny. There is an airbag helmet. It's called the Hovding. It's for cycling. I think they discontinued it, but it did really well. But the challenge of an airbag helmet, it's like, does it go off when you want it to go off, or did it go off when you didn't want it to go off? But it pumped up really big and protect your head and neck.
My gosh. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that one.
And downhill skiers have air vests that they wear. I don't know if you've seen those. We're talking the elite guys. I mean, they do because they're really expensive. But there is airbag technology out there. You might not see it in the common helmet, but there is technologies out there.
Just kind of going along here. Are helmet testing labs popular?
Not really. So the STAR helmet testing procedures program here at Virginia Tech is patented. And so no one can really replicate what we do. We go to that environment, create a test procedure, and evaluate and test rate rank helmets on a web page. So that's a patented process. There are helmet testing labs, but they don't have the full system. If you don't have a revenue source for doing this, it's expensive to test helmets. And what is your return? And so we're a consumer facing, and this is part of our public service mission as an independent test lab at a major institution. And so there's a lab called Folksam in Sweden. They test helmets sold there. It's an insurance institute though. And so they have a vested interest in safety products. Consumer Product Safety Committee tests helmets, and that's the standard. Consumer Reports tests some helmets, and we're maybe working with them sometimes. But yeah, so there are helmet testing labs that impact attenuation, etc. And there's a couple other university labs that do small type stuff. But again, the big scheme of we have 9 different star ratings: varsity football, youth football, flag football, soccer, ice hockey, cycling, equestrian, snow sport, whitewater sport. And so, yeah, we have a lot of them. We're adding rugby and hard hats, safety helmets here shortly. So ever expanding. But yeah, so there's labs that test. But again, this is a full rating scheme that most people don't want to undertake. And I mean, it's expensive. And so we generate revenue from prototype testing and things like that, other projects, grants, donations to help us keep moving along. So
Yeah. You're basically the varsity helmet testing lab, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, we're kind of world renowned and yeah,
Yeah.
growing in popularity, and people understand. And yeah, all the helmet manufacturers understand what we do and appreciate what we do, um, because they're kind of limited in some of the things they understand as far
Hmm.
as the research goes, and so they want to make safer products as well. But you got to understand the mechanism behind the injuries, so you can create design criteria to reduce those injury scenarios. So we play an integral part in the whole system.
Yeah. I like the analogy that you used, even comparing helmets to vehicles and how the safety in those, because yeah, you wouldn't go get a vehicle that just was not certified or had airbags or seat belts. You would kind of be questioning this a little bit. So I feel like referring that to helmets is exactly like that is like putting your seatbelt on before you go out and perform with your sport.
That's right. Yeah. How much does the car weigh? How much mass does it have? A Fiat's not going to be nearly as safe as some other cars. It's like, all right, I want the sporty feel, but you know what? Depending on what I'm going to be doing, maybe I do want a Ford F-150 truck.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be exposed all the time, and what type of skiing you do or snowboarding you do, all those kind of dictate your exposure.
Hmm.
Are you elite level? You're doing cliff jumps and that kind of stuff, or are you just cruising the greens? Not that you can't get injured, but your
Yeah.
exposure is different. So
Hmm.
yeah, so you
The
take that
risk.
all into consideration. And are you skiing once a year? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you ski every day, you might be more proficient, but your exposure to an accident is still greater, right? Because you're out there. Kind of like driving your car. If you drive your car every single day and that you're a commuter, then you probably want a safer car than if you just drive in town, going to the grocery store and back like Rambo, right? Or something like
Yeah.
that, right?
Totally. Yeah, it's so true. It's a risk assessment. I want to ask you this question because I feel you're going to have a great answer. When it comes to a fit of a helmet, there is a lot of controversy of is it okay to wear a beanie under, goggles over, goggles under? Does your testing lab kind of take any of that into consideration, or like do you have done any research in that?
We have lots of research related to those things. And so beanie, more padding is generally better. And the nice thing about beanies, it creates a slip plane between you and the helmet. And again, so we want the helmet to decouple, right?
Mhm.
You want the helmet to move independently before it takes your head with it. And so having a slip plane, your hair and your scalp is a natural slip plane. So adding a layer of padding or a beanie, and warmth, that's all good stuff. It's not going to change the impact attenuation capabilities of the helmet because, again, most of that comes from the density and thickness of the padding material. Now, fit, the most important component of fit is, does that helmet stay in place for the initial impact? So if it's too loose and it's not in the appropriate spot, it's not going to do probably as well as it could. But it needs to be tight enough and snug enough to be in place for that initial impact. When you have an accident, you flip over, hand over heels, head over heels. And some of these are kind of like the blizzard fall, right? And so you want to make sure the helmet stays in place for that initial impact. If it moves and slides down after that, that's okay. So we always say fit's more for comfort than it is for impact attenuation. Precise fit is not going to be all that more critical than just a slightly looser fit.
Okay.
It might decouple a little bit easier, but it's got to be comfortable first and foremost, right? You don't want to cinch it down so much that it's uncomfortable. But yeah, the beanie underneath, obviously, if it feels like it raises the helmet, it's not even on your head anymore. You can't get it down far enough. Too much padding in the top or something. Well, that's, you got to take that with a grain of salt. Like, well, maybe you need to go a helmet size up if you're going to wear a thick, knitted cap under there or something, right? So it still needs to be on your head per se, right, and cover where it's supposed to come down just above your eyebrows, etc. So
Yes. It's like demisable in your chin straps. Make sure it's buckled. Make sure your helmet is on your head for when you start tomahawking.
That's right. Is that what you guys call it?
Yeah. It's almost like a form of a car wreck on a ski or a snowboard when you are just flipping every which way possible. You don't know which way's up and which way's down. And you want your helmet to stay on.
That's right. Yeah. Again, it just needs to be in place for that initial impact for the most part. And as long as it doesn't come all the way off, it's probably going to provide pretty good protection for the secondary or those, multiple metal head impacts. But the first one's the biggest usually.
Yeah.
Just a lot of energy for the first ones. usually your shoulder, your back, something hits the ground first to start, that attenuation of energy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
a
Well,
good question. Yeah.
well,
Hair and fit are big questions. We get that a lot.
I've been using the term helmet curious. There's a lot of people who are like, I'm kind of am interested in starting to wear a helmet, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on over here. I don't know how it's supposed to fit. I can't even find one that's comfortable. It's definitely a problem in the system.
There's a broad range of helmets out there, and sizing, they have the dial fit. So I'd be surprised that most people can't fit into helmets. I know there's certain cultures that have really big, thick hair, and those can be a challenge because some of the helmets aren't extra large.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be a challenge. But for those, instead of going without a helmet, there is soft headgear out there, like they wear for rugby and flag football. So there are things they can wear if they can't find a helmet that fits them. We get this in the equestrian world, particularly with African American women that have really thick braided hair.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to be a little creative sometimes to find a helmet that fits. A helmet's usually better than no helmet, regardless of the situations. But there is those soft-sided headgear, headband style headgear, like on our soccer and flag football. Those are great as well. If you, for some reason, can't find a helmet, those are cheap, inexpensive, but pretty good soft kind of foam, pretty dense.
Totally.
But yeah, those do wonders as well.
We made a collab helmet with Giro, and the helmet engineer, I was just asking him a bunch of questions, and he said the safest helmet is the one you're going to wear. Whether you do want your beanie under and your goggles under, like a lot of people think it's a science of like, okay, well, get the helmet, fit it this way, keep the ear pads in, put the goggles, over, and that's going to be the most safe. But it's just like, at the end of the day, wearing a helmet is better than not wearing a helmet.
Absolutely. I concur. And those are good guys. We work with all those, Belgiro guys. Yeah,
we love them. I don't know. And it's been a lot of just learning and asking questions and being like, okay, I didn't know that the Giro Ledge helmet, when they are putting it together with the engineers, they are taking into consideration that somebody might wear their goggles outside or under. So it's made for both.
Right. Sure.
And again, people are just like, we don't know.
Yeah. And we also get questions, goggles, like cameras, mounted cameras, lights, speakers, and some of that stuff. Most of those attachments are pretty frangible. In other words, they break easily. And so in an accident, they're probably just going to break off, and they're probably not going to make much of a difference with impact attenuation. They, might provide some friction, and grab, but again, they usually just break off pretty easily. So we don't think there are major differences in those add-ons to the helmet. Usually your goggles will fly off anyways, right? They a little drag and they're gone. They're full of snow.
Yeah, enough momentum, they're out of here.
Yeah,
There's just no chance.
Dangling around your neck. Yep. So.
It is incredibly fascinating what you guys do at the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab, because I did not know this until I started Safer Brain, started diving into helmets, and was like, wait, this helmet testing lab exists? And they are just specializing in this one thing. It's just safety of helmets. And brands are just creating helmets to pass this test.
Yep, they're designing to do well in our test as well as the certifications. That's a marketing, and so they want to put the 5-star logo on their helmets and say we're Virginia Tech tested, which is great. It means it's safer than a 2-star or 3-star helmet. So.
I think it's awesome because people can just go to your website and sift through what is the safest helmet or what's on the scale, because a lot of people are just kind of like, especially people who have had a lot of head injuries, they want the safest helmet.
Sure,
and absolutely. I think a lot of people think just because it has MIPS or just because it has wave cell means it's safe or safer.
Or it's better. Let me talk about MIPS. So MIPS in general is a little plastic liner that goes inside the helmet. It creates a slip plane between your head and the helmet. So that little plastic yellow piece you see, and it theoretically helps improve the rotation of the helmet independently of your head. Again, your scalp and your hair are natural slip planes. And so MIPS, I don't think MIPS is a bad technology. It may help in certain situations, but snow sport accident scenarios don't have a lot of friction. Mm-hmm. Snow and ice don't have a lot of friction. So when you fall, you don't get that friction you would get like if you're a cyclist riding on asphalt. There's a lot of friction there, and that friction really causes changes to the rotational head movements, head kinematics. And so we don't see that, MIPS works as well in, those non-friction type surfaces, snow and sports. and again, I always say a good helmet's a good helmet regardless of the technology, and it's that density and thickness of the padding material, whether it's Colroyd, Wave Cell, 720, Hexago, EPS. There's tons of these padding materials or combinations of them, D3O. So that's really what drives impact performance for the most part. So sometimes the better helmets just happen to have MIPS because they have thicker and denser EPS layers.
Yeah.
So we don't really tease that out. We've done lots of testing, and sometimes MIPS help, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on exactly how you test it.
Totally.
Use the friction between the helmet and your head. I mean, lots of little things that get really technical.
Yeah.
So we don't want to go there. And people are like, what? Now I'm confused.
You would also lose me. I would be like, okay, got it. Okay.
Right.
I'm like, break that down even more. But no, it's good to hear that it's just like the $300 helmet isn't always the safest.
Nope.
Because helmets are
might look
so
better.
expensive. Yeah. Yeah.
Fashionable.
You look better. You're on the red carpet every day. But a lot of people, I feel like they're like, a helmet's too expensive. A good quality helmet's too expensive, so I'm not going to buy one. But they can
Your
go.
ski boots are expensive. Your gloves are expensive, right? I mean, your board is expensive. Helmet's a one-time expense for multiple years, hopefully, right? That you don't have them. But I should say this. A lot of the helmet companies have a crash plan. So if you got into an accident, you could send that damaged helmet back and they'll sell you or give you a new one, either complimentary or at a major discount, because they want to keep you as the customer. So that's good to know, depending on what helmet brand. I don't know if they all have it, but quite a few of them do.
Wow.
And that's important because a lot of times they'll use that helmet, the damage of that helmet, for research purposes. We'll do damage replication studies. So sometimes we even work with those companies. They'll send them to us so we can analyze them and go, oh, here's what happened. So,
wow. See, I did not. I just learned something new. You learn something new every day. I did not even know that. And I think people would just send photos being like, I damaged my helmet, but now I have to buy a new one. And they're expensive. So I can't afford one.
Yeah, check with your supplier or the vendor or manufacturer that sold you that helmet. Yeah, again, I don't know if all of them have it, but there's quite a few that do now. So at least give you a discount, and you can always try.
Totally, yeah, it doesn't hurt. Just reach out and ask.
Gary Miller from the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab said I should send you my helmet so I can get a new one complimentary or at discount and see if they go for it.
That's so good. You're just a coupon code.
That's right. Yeah.
Drop my name and maybe they'll give one.
VT Helmet Lab coupon code. Yeah. So
we're on to something. I mean, everything that you've said so far literally hits on all the questions that we get. How often if it breaks, do I replace it? It's like, yes, those are single impact. This is how you fit a helmet. Like, I feel like you're hitting the nail on the head of just everything that people are confused about. So thank you.
Can I explain one more thing? Because people are going to go to the website.
Yep, let's do it.
Again, STAR stands for the summation of tests for the analysis of risk. And so I want to explain the STAR score versus the number of stars. Okay, so the STAR score is what we calculate from all the impact tests. So based on each test condition, like so for snow sport helmets, we have 6 test conditions, right? A couple energy levels, a couple anvil, well, actually 3 locations and a couple anvil positions. So that's 6 separate test conditions. You with me? And so for each test condition, say it's the front of the head, for example, at low energy or the steeper angle, we're going to calculate based on that impact scenario, what's the risk of concussion, and that's based on those peak linear and rotational head movements. And then we're going to multiply that by some sort of weighting factor, depending on each sport's a little different. So front of your head at that angle, maybe it's more frequent, or maybe that impact location doesn't contribute to the overall STAR score as much. So there's going to be some sort of exposure or weighting value. We're going to multiply those together, and that's going to give you an incidence value. All right? And then we're going to add all 6 incidence values, summation of tests for the analysis of risk. So all 6 test conditions are added up to give you a STAR score. So the STAR score in some form or fashion represents concussion risk. So you want a low STAR score, right? Kind of like golf. Okay. You want a low score because that's going to get you the most money. Or for us, a low STAR score is going to put you in the best bin. So then based on the STAR scores, we're going to put you in the 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, 1-star. So the number of stars is just a quick little consumer say, oh, it's a 5-star. Yeah, you want it 5-star. But then within the 5-star, the lower the score, the better. Just so people
Got it.
understand that. And so the star score drives everything. And the reason I say that, because we're going to rescale, like bicycles is going to get rescaled here soon, because, when we started, there's only a couple 5-star helmets. Now on the bike, there's probably 115 5-star helmets. Well, it's time to differentiate once again to figure out what's the safest car, what's the safest helmet, right? 10 years ago, the safest car is not going to be the safest car today if it hasn't changed. And so we want to evolve. And so we rescale occasionally. We're going to do that for bike. We're not doing that for snow sport helmets just yet. But the star score is the critical piece. And then obviously you want to make sure you're in the 4 or 5-star category for sure.
That's helpful.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
Star score versus number of stars
Are different.
Are different, yeah.
Yes.
Number of stars is a general 0 stars bad, 5 stars good, right? But the star score is what determines where you are. And lower is better because the star score represents concussion risk in some form or fashion. And each sport's a little different. So you'd have to read the technical document to really fully understand. But anyways.
Well, that's helpful. Again, I was diving in just being like, yeah, there's so much cool things going on here. But I just was like, yeah, do you just assume it's just 5-star, great, winner, go for that? But yeah, like click on that, but dive deeper.
You could, yeah, if you need to. There's not nearly as many helmets in snow sport as there are bike helmets. Again, there's 130 5-star bike helmets out there. Well, there's a big difference now.
Yeah.
And the range of scores is way different for bike helmets, right? So the cutoff used to be like a 14.0 for bike helmets, but now there's bike helmets that have scores of under 9.0. And so, yeah, it's time for us to rescale. Snow sport, not there yet, but just so people haven't, because they get confused with the star score and the number of stars. So I just want to clarify that.
No.
It might save me a few emails.
It will. And like, yeah, everybody's like, get educated on the website, read through it.
That's right.
It's really cool to hear that you guys even are just, there's evolution of even just the helmet lab and how things are working, because everything is changing. Nothing is permanent.
Right. And we'll evolve. So the standards don't really change much. The certification standards, they're very slow moving. But, if we feel like we can improve the test methodology with, new added information or data, we'll update it. We're pretty flexible, we're pretty nimble, and again, we're consumer facing, so we want to be responsive to the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So we can modify things. Yep.
That's awesome. And that's how we know we can trust you.
We're independent. We're not funded by any helmet company or technology. And so we will remain independent as a, public institution. It's part of our mission. And so that's one advantage we have. We don't care what the results are. This is what they are. And we'll post those and rate them. And again, our allegiance is to the consumer, and safety is a principle overall.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not biased. This is for the safety of the people, for the world, for all of the brains out there.
Let's make things better. That's right.
Yeah.
We can do it. Yeah.
I think it's awesome. And before we, wrap it up here, I'm also curious, do you have anything fun and upcoming with research in the lab?
So yes, we're working on rugby helmets, and they use soft headgear. So again, I don't know if you guys see the news, like Guardian caps, the football players are wearing them. They wear them over the helmets. Well, that's soft headgear. So rugby players wear them directly on their heads for the most part. They can't be hard plastic because they're tackling each other without padding. It's not like American football or tackle football. So they wear soft headgear. So rugby headgear is in the works. And then we launched a safety helmet / hard hat research project a while back. And those ratings will come out sometime in August.
Wow.
A lot of people wear safety helmets, and they're not very good in the big scheme of things. Again, how they're designed and the test they're designed to is just not very realistic, biofidelic. And so we'll be launching those sometime this summer. That was funded by a couple major construction industry organizations, so it's great. They're interested in improving safety. So
yeah, I think that's so fascinating because, like you said, people wear hard hats for their jobs every single day. It's kind of like the risk assessment again. How often are you going to be wearing this and putting yourself at risk?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
What am I exposed to? And we're in the research phase, and that's exactly what we're doing. Like, how do people in work site environments hit their heads? Trips and falls are a big portion of them. But what else? I mean, is it a dropped, tape measure from 2 stories above, a hammer? Or is it you're bumping your head, you're working in the dark, working in, dusty environments, and, you bump into the front loader, things like that. I mean, blocks, tumble, whatever. I mean, just things happen. And so we
Totally.
want to figure those out. What do those impact scenarios look like so we can create a test procedure matrix here in the lab that best represents those types of injury scenarios.
That's
So,
awesome. And that's just like some real life shit. Like people
exactly.
are just
Real life
clock,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're just clocking in for work. That is a possibility, and accidents happen. And I mean, falls and trips are the number one cause of head injuries.
Yep.
You
Off
know,
ladders, step stools, they work in weird environments, right? And so things happen. You do it enough, you drive your car enough, sooner or later you're probably going to get in an accident, whether it's your fault or not.
yeah.
Right? And just the odds exposure, like you mentioned.
No, that's awesome. I'm excited to see the evolution of that because that's something that I don't think anyone has ever thought about. So, well, do you have before we wrap it up, do you have anything else you want to plop in or anything like that
No,
besides?
I don't think so. We covered a lot. So thanks for your questions. Thanks for the opportunity to share what we do. vt.edu/helmet, or just Google Virginia Tech helmet ratings.
Yep.
My email address is on there. I answer questions and comments all the time. So if you have follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer those. Kelsey, if you can, if people are going to email you, you can just consolidate them and I'll respond to all of them. And then you'll have here's the answers. Here's the cheat sheet.
Barry's our guy now.
That's right. Here's the cheat sheet. Here's the short abbreviated answer. Yeah.
We're so grateful to have you on here and chat about this because this is something that I don't think a lot of people in action sports even know exists. So I'm excited to share all of the work that you guys do at the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab. And we will link website, maybe some of those YouTube videos and everything that we have going on there so people can educate themselves further.
Sure. Yep.
And yeah, just
Great.
Thank you to you and your team because this is the stuff that's going to keep people safe and keep people out on the slopes and doing what they love.